that right there could be enough. Now, I won't be scared to do it again because it's not going to hurt anything. You can side dress them as many times. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a fantastic day. It is Sunday, January 6th here in South Georgia, and it's time to start pumping the juice to our short day onions. So in today's video, we're going to give a little update on our onions. We're going to talk about different sources of nitrogen that you could give them, organic and synthetic, and we're also going to take a look at how all our garlic is doing. So our short day onions here have started to pop. They're starting to grow fast. They're not as big as I'd like them to be at this point, but they look good. So I'm happy about that. Nice and green, and they're growing a lot faster just in the last week or two. Still battling a little bit of excess moisture in this plot right here. Had another hard rain last night, which muddied things up some more. Now our native soil in this part of South Georgia is pretty sandy, and all our plots drain pretty dang well. But in this plot, we've got so much organic matter left over from that soybean cover crop we had here before we planted the onions, and that's really helping this plot hold moisture. That's usually a good thing, but this winter we've been getting so much rain at one time that we've got a lot of moisture in here, and we've been having to do some frequent shallow cultivation just to help it dry out a little bit. So earlier today I came in here and did some of that delicate in-row weeding that's very important to do at this stage in the onions growth. You don't want the weeds getting the best of you at this point, because then they're going to be really bad down the road. So we take a little hand hoe and just come in here and scratch around these plants a little bit, remove any of those tiny weeds, and also kind of help that dry out a little bit. And hopefully in the next day or so, the area between these rows will dry out a little bit more. We can get in there with a wheel hoe and cultivate that a little bit. Now, a week or so ago, we had somebody comment and ask why we don't mulch our onions. A lot of people put straw or other types of natural mulch around their onions, and it seems to work very well for them. I mulched onions one time, I want to say it was about 5 or 6 years ago, and I think I used wheat straw, and it didn't work out very well for me. A lot of my onions rotted underneath that straw just because it was too moist and too damp. If I had mulch out here right now around these onions, I would really be battling too much moisture. So it's a good thing I don't have mulch out here, or else it would be even wetter than it is. Now when your onions start growing good like this and these tops start getting long and floppy, a lot of people, it just bothers them, and they want to come in here and cut these onion tops. They just can't take the fact that these onion tops have gotten so long and fall on the ground, and they want to cut them. Don't do that. Let them babies grow. Let them grow and grow and grow and fall all over the ground all they want. You show me somebody that's cutting their onion tops, and I'll show you a bigger onion. Now, as far as our onion fertilization plan goes, of course we had the chicken tractor on this plot before we planted the onions, but that's kind of hard to quantify. So let's talk about the fertilizer inputs we put down so far, minus the chicken tractor. So we put down some Coop Grow at planting, nice balanced pre-plant fertilizer. We gave them some AgriThrive a week or two ago. Just mixed some of that up in our dog's bucket and poured that alongside the plants, and I gave them one more shot of AgriThrive earlier today right after I did that little delicate in-row weeding. So they've basically had 3 applications of somewhat balanced fertilizer. Now I can see that they're starting to grow fast and they're starting to take off. That's when we want to start hitting them with the nitrogen. So we're going to be using blood meal, but maybe you can't find any blood meal. Maybe you've got some other stuff on hand. Maybe you don't care about being organic. So let's talk about all the different sources of nitrogen we could use to feed these onions. So let's start off talking about organic options, and then we'll cover synthetic options. Several good organic options for nitrogen out there. That NatureSafe 1300 we used to use a lot. I think it had blood meal in it, feather meal in it, and some other stuff. It works really well. I highly recommend it if you can get your hands on it. But that stuff can be a little bit hard to find, so maybe you want something you can find locally, like blood meal. Most of the time, blood meal has an analysis of 12-0-0, and that's what we're looking for here with these nitrogen fertilizers. We want that first number to be significantly higher than the other numbers in the analysis. So So blood meal is great. Feather meal is another good organic nitrogen fertilizer. Feather meal usually has about the same analysis as blood meal, something around a 12-0-0. And then another organic option you can use, although you do have to look at the analysis because it can vary from one brand to the other, would be guano, aka bat doo-doo. Some guano is seabird doo-doo, but there's lots of different guano options out there on the market. Just make sure you look at the analysis and make sure you've got a decently high nitrogen number for the guano you select to use. And then as far as synthetic options go, you've got sodium nitrate. You could also use calcium nitrate. I usually don't think of onions as something that need extra calcium, but if you've got some calcium nitrate around, you could certainly use that on onions. You've also got ammonium sulfate you could use if you want to give your onions a little extra bite. Sulfur is what does that, so if you want your onions to really taste like onions, ammonium sulfate is a great way to do that. And then another synthetic option you could use would be urea. Now this is usually pretty hot stuff. A lot of times the analysis is like 46-0-0, so you better be a little bit careful with the urea, but it would definitely pop the nitrogen to them. Now, as we know, the synthetic stuff is going to be faster than the organic stuff. The organic stuff is going to be kind of slow and steady, whereas the synthetic stuff is going to give them a quick pop. So you've got the advantage of the quick pop with the synthetic stuff, but I would warn about one downside when using a lot of those nitrate fertilizers. I have found they make the weeds worse. The weeds really seem to thrive when you put a lot of those nitrate fertilizers in the soil. We've seen it firsthand on our corn grow outs over the last couple of years. We haven't had near as many weeds since we quit using a lot of those nitrate fertilizers on our corn. Same thing with onions. Just be prepared to fight the weeds a little bit more if you go the synthetic route. All right, so we've got our little pitcher filled up with blood meal, and this stuff is really fine. So volume wise, we don't have to put down near as much of this as we would like a pelleted fertilizer. So with that Nature Safe 13-0-0 we used to use, we would do maybe a whole pitcher per row because it's in these big old fat pellets. But this stuff is really fine, so we don't need to use near as much. I don't know how much I'm going to use per row, but I can tell you it's not going to be a whole one of these per row. So what I'll do is just sprinkle it on top of the soil, kind of right beside those onion plants, not right on top of them, but just kind of right beside them. You will see some people side dress by making a furrow, so they'll dig them out a little trench here. They'll put their fertilizer in that trench and then come cover it up. That works well too, but I've found it's not really worth the effort for me. I just sprinkle it on top of the soil, then I can come back later and scratch it in with a wheel hoe. Shouldn't have to worry about it going nowhere. Since the soil's still kind of wet, it should stick pretty good. So I'm going to start sprinkling here, and then we'll talk about if we're going to have to do this again or if this is going to be enough. So we got that one application of nitrogen down, and that could be enough for us, unless my mind's going bad on me. I think last year, right over there, we only side dressed with the Nature Safe 13-0-0 one time and grew some monster onions. Now, just like this plot, we had our chickens on the plot before we planted the onions, so we do get a lot of help from the chickens there. So with the addition of the chicken tractor, since we started using that, it has reduced at least one side dressing. A lot of times with corn, we don't have to side dress those twice anymore. We can just side dress them one time. With onions last year, we just side dressed them one time. So that right there could be enough. Now, I won't be scared to do it again because it's not going to hurt anything. You can side dress them as many times as you want to. Just push those onions as hard as you want to. Just depends on how much you want to invest in your onions. They can take it, but you know, if we know we can grow some pretty decent sized onions with only one side dressing, then that may be all we do. The one thing to remember there, if you are going to push and push and push your onions, especially if you're using synthetics, don't fertilize them once they start bulbing. Once you start seeing that ground cracking and that bulb start to enlarge, cut off your fertilizer. But until that happens, push them as hard as you want. So now that we've taken care of our onions, let's check on our garlic, see how it's doing. So the first garlic we planted back in early December, I think, was our elephant garlic here. We have 3 double rows or 6 rows of elephant garlic, and I would say 90 to 95% of the bulb sprouted, starting to fill in good here, starting to look like it should. Now the last time I showed y'all this garlic, it was kind of bedded up. Each double row was kind of bedded up, and elevated, and I had to do that because I got a lot of hard rain after we planted it. Kind of washed away the soil around a lot of my garlic bulbs. So we did have some trenches here between the double rows from where we took soil to make those beds, but I have since filled in those trenches. So what I did was took a little bit of coop growth, sprinkled in those trenches, and then I came in here and topped them off with some bagged mushroom compost. Didn't take much for just these 2 little trenches here. So now it's all kind of leveled out again. I figured that mushroom compost would help amplify the soil biology in here even more, and our garlic's looking nice and happy. And so then a few weeks after we planted that elephant garlic, when we said that was the only garlic we were going to grow, we changed our mind and we planted some hardneck garlic here. This Spanish roja or rojo, whatever it's called, this variety that we grew a little bit of last year, and we had quite a few bulbs to plant. So we planted a double row here, and I think every single bulb we put down has sprouted. We're going to have a really nice looking full row of hardneck garlic here. And then a couple days after we planted that hardneck garlic, I had some softneck cloves left over from last year, this Island Star variety. This bed was open, so I said, hey, let's stick them in here, even though we did grow garlic in this bed last year. So we're kind of breaking our rules, but looks like every clove we planted came up. I didn't have a real particular spacing in mind here. I just tried to kind of give them each little bit of equal space. Don't have my irrigation hooked up in here, just been hand watering this, but they look pretty good so far. So later this afternoon, just like we did with our onions, I'll probably give our garlic a dose of that blood meal. Pretty much feed garlic the same way we feed onions. The only difference is we don't have to worry about stopping feeding at bulbing like we do with onions, because onions have those 2 distinct growing phases, the vegetative phase and the bulbing phase. We want to stop feeding when they start bulbing, but with garlic we can feed them all the way up to the finish line. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Don't forget to check out our website, lazydogfarm.com, where you can find a lot of the products that we use in our gardens around here. And if you want to see what hopefully we'll be getting come late April, early May from these short day onions, watch this video right here. You can see our harvest from last year where we grew some pretty dang big onions. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.